Hello, welcome to Shad Life. So you want to get into fat biking. That's what this video is going to be about. There's a lot of options out there to get into fat biking, but it really all depends on your experience level and your budget, right? So if you're getting into something new, let's just say you haven't even really mountain biked before, and for some reason you see these big fat tires and you think it might be cool. You really want to try this out before you go dumping tons of money into it. So when I was doing Global Fat Bike Day, I was riding my carbon salsa muckluck with, Mullafoot Sun rims and sealed hubs and SRAM GX and a dropper post and yada, 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 right? 27.5 by 4.0 wheels and tires. So we're looking at easily, if you look at the money I put into that, like $3,500 or so, right? So that is a lot of money for somebody to just say, oh, hey, I'm going to spend this money and get into fat biking, right? So the question is what is a good entry level or good way to get into fat biking without just blowing your budget, right? And there's a lot of really cheap fat bikes out there. You can go to the department store, and I know they make Mongoose bikes that are like, $400, $500, $600 and stuff like that. And there's some other brands too that are in that price point. But I highly don't recommend you go that route. And the reason why is because if you go that route, you're really not going to enjoy the ride. The chances are you're not going to enjoy it because you're going to be riding a really heavy bike that doesn't function all that well, and it's just not going to ride in the snow very good and things like that. You'll hear people rant and rave about their $600 bike that they did all this stuff to and they're whatever, and that's fine if you're into that. But I don't recommend most people go down that route because most people, they're not going to change all these parts and take a wrench to it and do all this stuff. They just want to buy a bike and ride it, right? And they also want to be able to take it to a bike shop. And most bike shops, they're not going to be able to do much if you bring a department store bike to them or a bike you bought off Amazon or whatever, and you say, oh, here, I need you to fix this, or oh, here, how can I upgrade this? They're not going to be able to upgrade it because the frame and fork and the way they spec things isn't compatible with the higher end components that bike shops sell. So I'll talk a little bit about a few bikes and why I recommend them, and then I'll talk about the weak aspects of some of them and some of the strong points of some other ones if you're willing to spend just a little bit more money. So let's get into it. Okay, so I'm going to go through a list of bikes that I recommend. Now, once I get into like more name brand bikes, I'll talk a little bit about this when I get there. There are other companies, there's a lot of fat bikes on the market that sell fat bikes, like Norco that I'm not going to mention and stuff like that. But I'm just going to talk about the ones that I kind of know about, and you can always compare to other brands. And there's a few key things I'm going to have you look for when you are shopping for a fat bike. So we're going to start at the bottom, and the first one that I have on my list is the Mongoose Argus Sport. It's $9.95 on Amazon. And I said, yeah, Amazon, blah, 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 right? So it kind of goes to show you where Mongoose is at on things. So you can get this bike on Amazon. Of course, it's going to come to you completely unassembled in a box. So you're going to need to know how to assemble it or take it to a shop and have it assembled. The disadvantage of it is it has quick release axles. It's something that I don't really like if you're getting into fat biking or any mountain biking, because right now through axles are all the trend. That's the kind of the way the industry's gone. And so if you have quick release, you're kind of limited on being able to upgrade it. So that one has quick release axles, a aluminum frame and fork, Shimano 10-speed Dior, which is 10-speed Dior is a bit older, but it's good quality drivetrain. So the drivetrain's decent. Certainly not the modern 12-speed that we're used to, but still good. So yeah, and the geometry of the Mongoose bikes is a little funky. I'm not gonna lie. Both of these Argus bikes are, because I have another one on here, but that's up the ladder a little bit. So the next bike I'm gonna bring up is actually this one sitting behind me, and it's the State Trail+Fat bike, right? And I've already talked about the unboxing of this bike and stuff, but I'll just give you a quick review. And it's $9.99. I actually got it on sale for $8.99 right now, but it'll probably go back up to $9.99. It also has quick release axles. So that's really the biggest detractor on this bike right here, is that it doesn't have through axles, so it'll make it more challenging to upgrade. It also doesn't have dropper post hole or routing in the seat tube. Doesn't have to come with a dropper post, but it's nice if they already have a hole in the frame so you can mount one. This bike doesn't come with one, so interesting. The geometry on this bike seems pretty decent to me. It's not wonky like the Mongoose one. I haven't gotten out and ridden this bike, but looking at the geometry, I know it's going to be pretty good. The Mongoose and this bike are going to be heavy. This bike is 40 pounds. That's a heavy bike. So 40 pounds. So that's another disadvantage of going this kind of ultra budget. I do not recommend bikes underneath this $9.99 price point or whatever. Yes, you can get fat bikes cheaper than this, but then you're getting into either really heavy bikes, you're getting into lower end components. Like this bike even comes with a square taper crank, which I consider kind of lower end. So this is kind of where I recommend the starting point being, knowing that you're going to have a hard time upgrading. So if you end up getting a bike like this and you really like it, you're going to struggle finding upgraded wheels. You can certainly put updated tires on it, which I recommended in my video of this and things like that, right? To save some weight and so on. So we're going to go step up a little bit. Where was the next one here? Oh, there's two bikes out there. One is currently on sale, but its normal price is like $1,900, but it's actually on sale right now, and I don't know how long this sale will last, for $12.99. So this is a killer deal. Is a Surly Wednesday. Now a Surly Wednesday is all steel, but it's 4130 chromoly, and if you know me and know about my channel, you know I like 4130 chromoly. My Surly low side is 4130 chromoly. So the disadvantage is it will be heavier, but it'll be a really good solid frame. It'll have good ride quality and all that stuff. That one has SRAM XS 12-speed on it, so pretty good deal there, and so on. So that's kind of higher up in the rung. That has through axles. It's got the whole deal. You can completely upgrade it however you want to upgrade it. It's got all modern spec, and that's the advantage of getting a bike like the Wednesday. So definitely a decent bike to get that you can upgrade. And if you're watching this video right now, what is it, December 3rd, 2023, $12.99. Rush to your bike shop, because that's a good deal. All right. The next one up, and this one I've just seen, I think they just released this not too long ago, is the REI actually has a brand called Co-op. You might, if you've been following my channel, know that I've had a Co-op bike that I've test rode and stuff, and it was pretty good. But now this one's the DRT 4.1 fat bike, and that's at a very good price point. Also, it's $14.99, and then nice thing about this one is it also has through axles. The through axles is really kind of that thing that you want to look for when you're shopping for a bike, because if it has the through axles and not the typical quick release levers, keep in mind there are some cool tricky through axle setups where you can use a quick release level, but it's still a through axle that you have to thread out. So, you know, just make sure you're getting a bike with through axles if you want to have that upgrade potential. So REI, pretty good bike. It's an aluminum frame, aluminum fork, so probably a little bit on the heavier side. It does have SRAM XS 12 speed, just like the Surly. SRAM XS is okay, but it's not my favorite component group. NX is kind of that more entry level point of higher end stuff, and then GX and up. But SX is kind of like that way they make it so you can get a 12 speed drivetrain and get in the door. Now we're going to get into spending a little bit more money, but getting a little bit better bike. With the exception of this one, the Mongoose actually makes a bike called the Argus Comp, so it's their highest end fat bike. It does have through axles, so that's good. Has a Shimano 11-speed drivetrain, also pretty good. Aluminum fork. It's $16.99. The only thing I don't really like about the Mongoose Argus is it's got funky geometry. You'll notice it has a longer stem on it. It's kind of older school geometry. It's a little outdated as far as the geometry goes. And then there's the number one bike that I would recommend. And I recommend it as the best entry-level fat bike that you can get that you can upgrade. And you're going to start with a really decent bike and then be able to move from there. And that is the Salsa Heyday, but it's an aluminum frame. So it's very similar to my Salsa Muckluck, but it's an aluminum frame instead of a carbon frame. But it does have a carbon fork, right? And then, you know, it's got decent wheels and tires and all of that. Where they downgrade and save some money is in the drivetrain. It's got Advent 9-speed, so it's not even Advent X, which is the 10-speed Advent system I have on the nuke-proof Scout over here. It's got the 9-speed, so it's a little bit lower end, but it's okay. It's decent. But it's completely 100% upgradable. You're actually going to get a decent crank set with, you know, external bearings and true, you know, spline engagement instead of square taper, like something like this, and so on. So that is the bike I recommend if you truly want to get into fat biking and you want something that you can upgrade and make like super dialed down the road, and you want to throw a dropper post on it because it's got routing for a dropper post and things like that. That's the bike I recommend, is the Salsa Heyday at their base level, the Advent for $16.99. And then there's another bike that I also would recommend if you're willing to spend the money. And the reason why I like this bike, this is actually the nicest bike on the list. It's the Trek Farley 5, and it's $2,199. What I like about the Trek Farleys, though, this is what makes them different than all other fat bikes, is they have a 27.5 wheel. This is a 26-inch wheel. 27.5 wheel by 4.5. So these are 26 by 4.5, but imagine having a bigger diameter with this size tire on it. Like, that's what makes the Farley cool, is you can put big, fat tires on a 7.5, as to where with the setup I currently have, the 4.5, the highest I can really get away with is 4.0 tires, because then I start running out of room in the frame. But the Farley will accommodate 4.5, but 27.5 by 4.5 tires. That's what makes it cool. The Farley also comes with Advent X 10-speed. Now here's the thing, and it comes with a carbon fork, right? So here's the thing about Advent X 10-speed is, especially for fat biking, it is all you need. It's got the pretty big 48-tooth rear and plenty of wide range gear ratios. You don't need a 12-speed system on a fat bike. You're riding in the snow. So an Advent X drivetrain is actually ideal, or just, it's perfectly fine. It's, like I said, what I have on the nuke-proof Scout for even riding in the summertime, and it works great. It shifts great. I mean, Advent X is kind of my favorite lower-priced drivetrain. It's just super dialed, and it's made by Microshift. So that's my list. I'll have this list down in the comments. And so you can look through and see. So if there's another brand, let's just say Kona, or like I mentioned earlier, Norco, or whatever, right? There's a bunch of brands that make fat bikes now, right? Canyon makes a fat bike, right? So what you want to do is you want to go on their website and look, and the things you want to look for is you really want to look for whether it has through axles or not. You really don't want this quick release. Yes, if you just absolutely, that's all you can afford. All you can afford is $1,000, and you really want a fat bike, by all means, buy one of these or whatever. Have at it. Have a blast. It's going to be heavy. It's not going to be ideal. Definitely going to be better than one of those Mongoose bikes for sure. I'd even recommend this over the higher end Mongoose Argus bike, just because of the geometry. But try to get into having a through axle, front and rear. That's kind of my number one thing to look for. Usually once you get into through axles, you should get into a better crankset that has external bearings, a spline system that holds the cranks together rather than the square taper, things like that. And hopefully it's dropper post compatible. And you might be thinking, why do I want a dropper post? I don't go off jumps or anything like that. One of the biggest things I use a dropper post for on a fat bike, yes, I go off jumps and stuff too on my fat bike, but the main reason why I recommend a dropper post on a fat bike is because if you ever have to step off the bike, you come to a stop and have to step off the bike, keep in mind your foot will sometimes sink into the snow. Especially if you're stepping off the side of the trail, it'll sink into the snow. If you get in the habit of dropping your dropper post when you come to a stop, you'll have that ability to get your foot down. If your seat's super high and you put your foot down and then it sinks in the snow, you're going to tip over, right? So I really think a dropper post on a fat bike is really important, because then you can make sure that you drop that thing when you come to a stop, or if you're getting into some kind of hard technical stuff, you can drop it, and so on and so forth. So dropper post is a nice thing to have. So even if the bike doesn't come with a dropper, which a lot of fat bikes don't, at least if they're dropper compatible with the hole in the frame for routing, cable routing, you can put a dropper on there later. So those are the things you should be looking for, regardless of what brand fat bike that you want. Now, if you want to just go full blower, lightweight, and have the sweet ride, then by all means, look into brands like OTSO, or the carbon mucklucks, or the carbon salsa bear grease, or things like that, and just jump right into the high end, pretty lightweight bikes. Like, you'd be surprised. My salsa muckluck is under 30 pounds. You see the big tires and you pick it up, you think it's going to be super heavy, and it's like, oh, this thing's lighter than my full suspension bike over here, right? Like, so you can definitely go nuts, spend $3, $4, $5, $6 grand and get yourself a completely dialed fat bike. You can get an OTSO with carbon rims and electronic shifting and all the whole spiel if you want to. And those bikes are amazing because they just float and they're so fast. And you think that a big fat bike is going to be kind of slow and piggish. This bike would be slow and piggish. An OTSO with carbon rims is going to feel like a race machine, which is exactly what it really is, right? So, yeah, I'll put a link to OTSO down in the description. Probably one of the better fat bikes out there if you're willing to spend the money. And so on. So there you have it. Those are some of your options if you want to get into fat biking. And I want to add one more thing before I end this video. Once you have a fat bike, there's a lot more things you got to think about. You need to have the right footwear so your feet don't get cold. That will also grip the pedals, because you don't want just regular winter boots with big aggressive traction on the bottom because they're not going to grip your pedals. You need a flat bottom boot, or if you clip in, you can get clip-in boots. Boots, good boots, cost, you know, $300-400 just for the boots, for riding boots. But I have a pair of Columbia boots. I'll put that also in the description, that have a nice flat bottom that were like $150. So you can find boots out there that'll do what the job that you need if you're running flat pedals. And then of course you've got your layers, your weather. You don't want to just wear normal winter clothes. You're going to go out there, start sweating, everything's going to get wet and heavy, and then you're going to freeze. You definitely need, think cross-country ski if you've ever cross-country skied. You need sweat wicking layers and so on and so forth. So I will do a video on what I wear for riding in the cold weather coming up here soon, and I'll talk about layering and all of that. So that'll be a whole nother topic, but that's a whole nother expense if you don't have clothes like that already for some other activity. Like if you're a cross-country skier, you probably have all the clothes you need for fat biking, but if you don't do some other winter activity like that, make sure you budget to get the good clothes, because that's more important, that you don't put yourself at risk being out in the cold and potentially get injured or frostbite or something like that. There you have it. I really appreciate your support for my channel. Please like and subscribe. Peace.